Bosses of Reddit, what did your new employee do that made you instantly regret hiring them? She stapled papers in the middle of the page, like as far as she could reach with the stapler. Couldn't figure out how to log into email with step-by-step directions on the first day. Needed step-by-step directions every day for everything on the computer. Me day 3, did you double-click Outlook icon? Him, oh yeah? Now what do I do? Me, type in your password. Him, what's my password? Me, you picked your password the first day. That's why it's called a password. Only you know it. Him, oh yeah? Proceeds to sit there for 15 minutes doing nothing because he doesn't know his password. I'm usually pretty gentle when I fire someone. He wanted to argue he was computer literate during his termination meeting. I ran a call center. Incoming and outgoing calls. Turn on 3 programs, hit the button and everything works automatically. Pretty simple. We hire a lot of felons because we think society gives them a raw deal when they get out. Turns out some of these guys are felons for a reason and deserve a raw deal. This guy was early to mid-30s. Had been a mortgage broker before getting arrested for killing a neighbor. Turns out he didn't kill his neighbor, at least the state couldn't prove he did, but he still ended up doing 2 years waiting for trial. The other employees refused to help him after the first week because he would ask the same questions every day. The exact same question. He would ask me and I'd look at the rest of the phone room like, are you kidding me? Is this a prank? This has to be a prank, right? Do you have a condition where you forget everything every night? It took me 3 weeks to get through all the performance improvement plan steps to fire him. But basically I wanted to fire him on day 3. I knew I'd done goofed. A friend of mine works at a construction recruitment agency, and recently told me a great story. His colleague got a phone call in the office from a client, the foreman of a large construction site, who immediately began to scream at him to come to the site and collect a laborer from the agency who was on his first day working there. It transpired that this young, chavvy temp had left the tracked excavator he was supposed to be operating to find the foreman and demand a socket set to remove the excavator's seat, as he dropped his phone under it and couldn't reach it. The foreman told him to fuck off and get back to work, and that he could try to retrieve his phone at the end of the day once he was off the clock. Phones weren't allowed on site anyway. After a shouting match, the laborer stormed off, climbed into the neighboring excavator, and used its bucket to rip the cab off his machine to get to his phone. Needless to say, the agency took him off its books. I feel like right now I'm that new employee. Day 1 relative died, delayed my start by 2 days. Day 5 husband of relative died, was offered compassionate leave. Day 13 girlfriend fell down the stairs and needed to go to hospital. Day 15 I had a pre-booked holiday, another day off. Day 16 girlfriend's passport stolen in another country. Missed our train home. Weather prevented us traveling that entire day. Day 17 arrived 2 hours late after having to travel across Europe before work. Day 36 boiler explodes during the night, and need to sit around for an emergency plumber who then takes all day to fix it. I really swear it's all the bad luck at once, but even I know it sounds so unrealistically far-fetched at this point. They were loudly taking a phone call while waiting to be interviewed. Taking a call is not a total deal breaker by itself, but the call was her coaching the friend into getting fired so she could get unemployment. I didn't hire her, but after I left I think someone else did. I hope my former boss doesn't comment about his employee that made 2 espressos when someone asked for a double espresso. I regret being myself, guys, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure it's a barista rite of passage to make the wrong drink. I give out a daily summary of unresolved cases and new cases yet to be answered. I handwrite some notes on it as well. On her second day, she asked why her score went down. Confused, I asked her what she meant. Yesterday I got a 10-12 but today only 10-13. The date. I once worked with someone who was an absolute waste of space. My boss said he was going to promote him. I told him not, it's a bad idea. After 3 months of training the guy became a manager, then on his first shift alone stole all the cash from the day's sales. I wasn't even mad, I smiled when my boss told me. Don't know what you guys do, but I'm really struggling to think of what kind of payout that was to make. Stealing from people who have your security number and address on file. Worth it. What's the company policy on fighting? He was totally serious too. When told he can't, he asked, what about in the parking lot? Ran an in-home senior care business. Hired a chick and she got a sweet-ass gig. 9 to 5, steady work, great, easygoing family, and easily cared for elderly lady. All she had to do was wear scrubs, not tank tops and shorty shorts. That's it. One weekend was when that changed. We also found out that she brought a catalog of stuff to sell to the person she was caring for. Ended up selling her like $500 worth of shit. Luckily, we were able to stop it in time. Only person we ever had to actually fire. Everyone else lost their client, or just quit. Losing a client in your profession sounds terrible. But when I read this the first time, I totally thought you were talking about literally losing someone. Like, where the hell is Mrs. Jones? She was just here. Oh well, guess I need a new job. I hired someone for a moving company I was with 7 years ago, based near Milwaukee, Wisconsin. On his first day, he was supposed to take the company car and drive to Madison, Wisconsin. He didn't show up. Fired him on the way to his job. I had a new guy to train in my job where we installed TVs and various other electronics in expensive houses. I had a small part in hiring him, and even though he wasn't from our industry, he seemed to have good skills in related fields and seemed to be willing to learn what he needed to. Our first 2 weeks were spent finishing up a really nice theater. House was completely finished, and it was pleasant, easy, indoor clean work. Then we moved on to the next job and had to wire the house, which involved crawling through the attic and underneath the floors pulling new wires. I turned to this guy and told him to take these 5 wires down underneath the house and crawl them to the other side. He looked at me like I had 3 heads and said, "What? No way! I am not going under there." I was taken aback. This is a huge part of the job, and he had to have known that when he was hired. After a couple minutes of talking to him, it was clear he had no intention of doing any dirty work. He ended up going out and sitting in the work van pouting. I called our manager, and when we drove back to the office at the end of the day, his final check was waiting for him. He was completely stunned, and got really upset, trying to blame me as his trainer for setting him up, and making him do stuff that no one would ever want to do. I didn't get to see the final encounter myself, but it became the talk of the company for a while. Apparently he never managed to get it through his head that we all had to do that type of work and I wasn't singling him out. He blamed me and the company for him losing his job all the way out the door. Apparently he also tried lying to the unemployment office and got shut down hard when my manager explained why he was let go, and he corroborated it, still assuming that we were in the wrong for asking him to do that type of work. Asked me permission to use the bathroom. Every time. In spite of my protestations that he was an adult who I trusted to make his own decisions about going to the lab. He also sent me a weekly spreadsheet of all his breaks, potty and otherwise, lunches, and arrival and departure times. This is in no way required or the norm in our workplace. Finally, after multiple pleas from me, he stopped doing that. He was very smart and very skilled, but this was the first indication that he would otherwise be a lot of work. Downloaded and stole all of our email company info and prices and took them to the competitor. We sued the shit out of him and won though. I didn't hire them, thankfully, but I did work at a call center with a couple that got hired into different divisions. He went to work in sales, and she went into customer service. This isn't all that unusual by itself. What happened next though, wow. Their plan from the start was to see how quickly each of them could get let go after they'd started their medical benefits, which kicked in around the 90-day mark. So they were both fairly exemplary. During that time, they both began talking to coworkers in their divisions about their off-work time, internet habits, etc. Eventually, they started canvassing their respective divisions with business cards advertising their NORP site and inviting people to join. Apparently, they did this pretty frequently: get a job to get medical insurance, then plot to get let go, so they could draw unemployment and continue to keep medical insurance going via COBRA. In the meantime, they'd get as many of their doctor and dental visits as they could scheduled. Then, they'd drum up interest in their NORP campsite, because by then they'd have gotten to know a ton of people. And who doesn't want to see the hot girl guy at the office having sex? They were both very attractive. Even the managers involved in this clusterfuck of a plan had to admit that the angles on all this were exceptionally slick. And because Phoenix is rife with call centers, they were able to work their way up and down a certain area of town without any of the respective businesses becoming the wiser. Obligatory not me, but this bloke shows up on his first day. The foreman has a picture on his phone of a girl he's showing the guys. New guy proceeds, in graphic detail, to say what he'd like to do to the girl. The girl was the foreman's 13-year-old daughter. He was summarily dismissed. For context, it was a pic of her holding up a fish she'd caught. Lucky he didn't get put in a casket. We hired a bench technician to do electronics repair. The first job I asked his help with was to extend a comm cable. 3 conductors. Easy peasy. Cut the cable, splice an X amount of new wire, done. He comes back to me an hour later with the original cable, cut in 2, then spliced back together. Without adding anything to it. Instead of extending it, all he did was cut it and put it back together. And it took him an hour. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.